Amanda Wiggins, a neuroscientist PhD. I am delighted to have you on the podcast, Amanda. When I think of neuroscientists, I think of like some of the smartest people in the world, way smarter than me. But like you study the brain, you study brain health, and I wanted to get a neuroscientist on the podcast for a while. So when you emailed, I was like, yes, let's go.
It is a pretty interesting topic, I must say. It's been my passion for a good sort of 30 years now. And I'm continuously fascinated by the new research that comes out, which, in some cases turns what we thought we knew on its head. So it's brain science is my great love, I guess you could say.
That's very sweet. At what stage did you decide like this was the avenue of science that you wanted to go down?
Oh gosh, probably late high school. I was a bit delusional really in some ways. I really wanted to understand the seat of human consciousness. I thought by studying neuroscience you could sort of get to the bottom of that. What makes us human? Why do I feel these things? You know what it's like when you're a teenager. Life is pretty full on in your head, right?
Oh yeah.
I wanted to understand that. So yeah, I went off to university. I did an undergrad in neuroscience, an honours degree. And then I did my PhD over at the University of Melbourne in Australia. And then after that, I went off to San Francisco and did a postdoc at UCSF. So I kept going back for more, but I've actually been out of the academic world for about gosh, coming on 19 years now, and I've been working in the regulatory space that governs, well, biotech, and in the last 11 years in the science commercialization space. So taking great science and turning it into products and services.
So I know everybody wants to know. So I'm going to ask, did you find out what the meaning of life is?
I tend to be fairly reductive in that space, actually, after studying the brain for such a long time. And people have different views on this, right? But I guess where my view has ended up is pretty reductive. Like I think of the brain as just being this big sort of, firm sack of tissue with all this electricity going on, neuron to neuron connection, all these chemicals being released, neurotransmitters that make us feel certain things. So my view is probably more reductive than most people's would be.
Yeah.
It would take quite a bit of convincing for me to look outside of that very sort of physical realm, I think, when it comes to consciousness.
Maybe physics needs to be your next venture.
It's so fascinating though to think, just the basic physiology of how a neuron works, right? So our neurons are connected to each other, billions and billions of connections. They work by transmitting electricity along the axon, and then it gets to the end, and uh, when it gets to the end of the neuron, that releases certain chemicals called neurotransmitters, and the neurotransmitters then talk to the next neuron, and so it goes on. So, hence my thinking around it's just basically electricity and chemicals.
While you're speaking about neurotransmitters, a lot of people hear about neurotransmitters connected and their connection or influence over hormones. Is that like something you could elaborate a little bit more on?
I must say it's not really my area of specialty, but I do remember right back in the day when I was studying neuroscience as an undergrad, having a big section on learning about this and just how much the brain changes throughout a woman's menstrual cycle.
Mhm.
So in that premenstrual phase, PMS phase, one thing I do recall is that the glial cells, so that's the non-neuronal cells that kind of pad out and sit around the neuronal cells, they remodel themselves in that premenstrual phase and they block some of the neurotransmitters from being effective. So that kind of dumbing down feeling that some people might feel, and I certainly did, it's your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I was having this conversation with my husband recently because he stupidly said there's no
Oh,
such thing as PMS. And I was like, what? What did you just say? I was like,
Yeah.
I'm from Dublin originally. I didn't mention that to you, but I was like, if I was you, I would leave the room right now. But so then we were listening to a podcast on a long drive. I don't know if you know who Dr. Daniel Amen is. So he's a psychologist and neuroscientist, primarily in the States, but works worldwide. And he does a lot of brain scans. And he was saying that he grew up with five sisters, and PMS was obviously very prominent in his house. So when they were old enough and he had access to scans, he said he scanned all of their brains, PMS and outside PMS. And he said the brains looked like two different people, like completely different people. The brain activity, I mean, a lot of us feel like two different people during perimenopause, but he said you could physically see the brains looked completely different. So then I was like, see, I told you
Yeah.
PMS was
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. That change in mood is very real and can be very, very stark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then back to the body, you were saying the brain, the cells, all of it's so amazing. Like we can't even begin to comprehend how amazing our body is. We don't even know everything that's going on with our body. There's so much still to be explored, yet so many people take it for granted. And especially the brain. We take our brain for granted. So, how many people want to get in shape or they want to lose weight? But how many people actually say, I want a fitter, healthier brain. I want to prepare my brain now for future aging. But right now, in the space that I'm in, is more hormonal perimenopause focused. And we're starting to hear a lot of you need to prepare your muscles for aging. You need to prepare your bones for aging because you're going to need to prevent sarcopenia and if you fall and this, that, and the other. But nobody's saying you need to be preparing your brain now for aging. And that's where I was eager to speak to you.
Yeah, I think that is such a valid point. And in fact, it's very important to prepare your brain for aging. There's a really huge body of evidence that's I would say not just emerging, but now very strong, that shows the things that we do in the period of our life have a huge impact on our brain health later and our risk of developing a neurodegenerative disease like dementia. And at least some of that issue comes down to vascular dysfunction and vascular damage. And there's some really interesting computer modeling that's been done around the changes that happen in our brain vasculature. If you can imagine, the blood vessels in your brain are a bit like a garden hose, right? So there's stuff going through it all day, every day. Uh, and this in silico modeling showed that damage starts to occur in the middle of age, sort of 30 to 40, and reaches a tipping point at 75. So the way I like to think of that, and that's of course when there's a step increase in the risk of
Mm,
developing dementia or other neurodegenerative diseases. I kind of like to think of it, if you left your garden hose out in the sun and it was being degraded through UV light and you had water going through it at too high pressure all the time. Many of us have slightly elevated blood pressure. You would eventually break that hose, and that's what happens. And now it's been traced back to lifestyle factors in your 30s and 40s that build up over time. And there was a really fascinating publication that came out last year, 2024, from the Lancet Commission on dementia prevention and care and intervention. So the Lancet Commission is a conglomerate of the world's best minds on dementia. So researchers and clinicians, carers, best practice. So they meet every 4 years and review and bring together all of the latest research on dementia. So it's a really reputable source.
yeah.
There's a lot of information out there. Um, Personally, I really like to go to the Lancet Commission because you know that they've done all the hard work and that they take this stuff seriously, right? It's their life. So they published this study in 2024 that identified the 14 modifiable risk factors for dementia So that just means modifiable. They're things that if you changed in your life, you could reduce your risk of developing dementia later on. And what's interesting about it is that those identified risk factors actually start very early in life, in the first 5 years, around the level of education that someone has. And that really speaks to the kind of the use it or lose it aspect of your brain, just like your muscles. And you mentioned sarcopenia, you've got to use your muscles. You've also got to use your brain.
Okay.
Um, because we were talking earlier about the billions and billions of connections in the brain between neurons. If you don't use those connections, they just shrivel up and die. If you keep using them, those connections are strengthened, and in fact, you create more and more connections, and that's a very resilient brain. So, um, yeah, the Lancet Commission's work identified early education as a risk factor. So more education is associated with a 5% risk reduction in developing dementia later in life. Isn't that interesting? Right from the very start.
Because you're getting a burst of stimulation, I suppose, in the
Yeah,
brain to connect the
yeah,
neurons. I'm learning new stuff, and you're already in that kind of growth phase of life.
yeah, that's right. You're activating your neurons, your connections. And then we head into the middle part of life, which is where I'm at. I'm guessing that quite a few of your listeners will be at this stage as well. And they identified a raft of lifestyle factors in there that if you address them, could significantly reduce your risk of developing dementia. So it's things like reducing your LDL cholesterol. If you have depression, seeing someone for that. If you have brain injury, seeing someone for that. Physical inactivity, no surprises there. Diabetes, no surprises there.
Mm.
High blood sugar damages blood vessels and all sorts of things. Smoking, hypertension, again, absolutely no surprises. Obesity and excessive alcohol. And one of the ones I find really interesting is they identified hearing loss in the middle part of life as being a significant risk factor. And again, it comes back to that use it or lose it. You think about your neurons firing off. Here we are speaking, Shemaine. We've got this information going into my ears. I'm enjoying the conversation. It's making my brain work.
Yeah.
And you think if you had less and less hearing over time, you're just taking less information in. And so, yeah, the Lancet Commission identified that particular risk factor as contributing a 7% risk to developing dementia later in life, meaning if you address it, you would reduce your risk by 7%.
Oh.
All of the risk factors added up, they think contribute up to 45% of someone's risk of developing dementia later in life. So that's huge, right? That's pretty close to 50%.
Yeah.
And when we think about the stats, so I read the other day that there's 10 million new cases of dementia every year globally. That's really the human impact of that, the human suffering, the impact on families is massive. The impact on health systems and their ability to care for these people
It's a
is
lot.
scary. It's tricky. I find I can't quite imagine a future where this number keeps going up and up and up. So, for me, I think about these things. I've seen it firsthand now with two relatives. My aunt died of actually Alzheimer's disease, and my stepfather also has dementia. So when you see that firsthand, to me, that's what has really woken me up to keep your brain fit. As you say, Shemaine, we know this message, keep your body fit. We're all doing the best we can there, but the keep your brain fit message, I really think that needs to be out there more.
Mhm. The hearing aspect is very interesting to me, especially in the kind of use it and lose it consideration, because there's a lot of talk now around loneliness being a big factor in cardiovascular issues as well and early onset death. And I'm sure people could argue, well, you could listen to the radio, you could listen to the TV, but I wonder if actual human to human conversation and the different frequencies that we get from talking to one another that's not filtered through a TV or radio influences that use it or lose it aspect. So what I'm trying to say is I wonder if the whole kind of loneliness aspect and dementia aspect are tightly intertwined when we think of it this way.
Yeah, I think so. And that's a really good point because, yeah, just harking back to this Lancet report from last year, they then go on to identify three additional risk factors later in life. And one of them is social isolation. So you hit the nail on the head there. And social isolation, they say, contributes about 5% to a person's risk of developing dementia. Social connectedness is a really interesting one because it's actually a multi-modal, it's a very rich multi-modality sensory input, right? Speaking to a person, connecting with a person or a group of people, laughing, the number of expressions and really minor changes that someone has on their face, their the intonation in their voice, the way they stand, their posture, everything. It's like this massively rich source of input, right? And we're as humans, we're trying to interpret it. Our brain is on fire when we're talking to other people, and you don't get that when you're looking at a phone or looking at the TV. So yeah, that is
And your
exactly it.
accent
It's
as well. So your accent and my accent, people listening, the oscillations between how we pronounce words and we peak at different words and all. There's a lot of stimulation going on there that you just there's a like you said there's a lot to be said for human to human connection because then we're getting the other stuff, the unseen energy frequency we're sending out to another person, the aura as they say. So that's why I suppose we realized after COVID that we very much are social animals and we really really need to be around each other for optimal health.
absolutely. Wasn't that lockdown horrendous? I
For
mean,
you it
we had a couple
was.
we had a couple of them over here in New Zealand. I am a total extrovert just in terms of where I get my energy. I get it from interacting with other people. I don't do that well in sort of quiet situations on my own. I mean, I had my family with me, thank goodness. That to me was a real eye opener. I just to be healthy and well, I need to connect with others. I hadn't kind of, I guess, overtly realized that prior to all the COVID lockdowns.
Well, again, because
Mm,
we think of healthy and well as to be fit and eat good. We don't think of the other aspects, the laughing, the
mm,
joking, the seeing our hugging people, and then the brain.
mm,
Like we're very premature when we think of health. We're still on that track of nutrition, exercise, and maybe sleep is getting a bit more notice nowadays, but we're still very
mm,
premature in how we consider being healthy, especially in the
mm.
long term. So I have a couple of questions, but I'm going to go back to this list from the Lancet because I have to ask, because at some stage I'm going to point my kids towards this conversation. How and if it's not there, just lie, because then I'll still show them this. How does blue light exposure and dementia, Alzheimer's, neurological issues, how is like this chronic exposure of looking at computers, whether or not it's a laptop doing work or you're playing intense computer games, zombies everywhere, but then the blue light at nighttime in the evening, one thing I hear all the time, and I get it, but that doesn't mean it's right, is it's the only time of day I have to myself to watch my shows, and this just chronic blue light exposure all the time. Surely that's causing a lot of damage.
Oh my gosh. So I'm a mum. I've got two teenagers. They game. So look, what we're going through as a society with the amount of online activity, gaming is just one, but all the online activity is unprecedented, right? We don't actually know. We don't know what this is doing to our brains and particularly our young people's brains who, they possibly have more exposure than people who are in their middle part of their life. Look, It concerns me greatly, put it that way. Yeah, greatly. Especially, yeah, these high impact, fast games, and you hear your kids yelling out like they're on the battlefield, right? This is cortisol coursing through their systems. And then there's also the blue light. We know that's not good for you. It disrupts your sleep. And sleep is critical. I think we don't know the extent of the damage that this is doing to brains.
But it's
I
definitely
guess it's
damage. It's not doing any
it's
good. It's definitely
definitely
damage.
damage. It's not doing anything good. Yeah, it's like, sticking on a headset and going into one of these hardcore war games. It is like going to war. The amount of cortisol that releases in your system, and cortisol takes a couple of days to come down, actually. It's not good. It's not good. I don't have the answers. I'm sorry. I'm a mum and I worry about it heaps, endlessly.
Well, I love doing these podcasts and I love teaching, and when I do group videos or master classes or whatever, I enjoy it. I want to help people, but I would be lying if I didn't say I didn't feel it. I feel it
Mm,
so much between, as you know, when you're trying to think so fast and produce answers and hop onto my, as you know, my brain is using a lot of energy. If I'm teaching an hour master class and people are also popping up questions on the side, the brain is just moving so fast. Then the blue light from the laptop as well. And then I don't know what you call this light here that's also brightening everything up. I feel the blue light so intensely. I can feel the neuroinflammation. I feel my mouth and my eyes get dry. I can feel inflammation around my neck. And so I'm cognitively aware of it. Other people are
mm,
not. So I'll try limit it. I don't watch a lot of TV or whatever, and my exposure is on the computer, but I'm aware of it. I'll try limit it. But then we have people who are sitting in front of computers all day, every day, and then they're going and watching, I don't even know what's on TV anymore, something all evening, and they're wondering why they have so much brain fog, or they're starting to
mm,
get forgetful, or they've chronic headaches and they're not sleeping. And I'm like,
mm, mm.
this is the problem. Just because the TV is there doesn't mean it's a good idea.
I know we've become so habitually used to having a screen in front of our face, haven't we? It's really, I do worry about it hugely. Just, switch off for a bit, go for a walk. Um, actually, on that front, there's a lot of great evidence these days around, of course, the importance of exercise. But the bit that I'm interested as a busy CEO and a busy mum is what about just a small amount of exercise? I don't have time in my day to go off and do a huge workout every day. I try to do big workouts on the weekend, but during the week, I'm pretty busy, right? So what I love is there's all this emerging evidence that shows even 15 minutes of brisk walking a day is so beneficial, and almost everyone can squeeze in 15 minutes, right? So that's what I like to keep in mind. These modifiable risk factors for the brain, they don't have to be, all encompassing, just small changes. So get out there, go for a quick walk, even if it's cold and you don't feel like it, just try to push through. Do the best you can.
Or,
I
yeah,
was really interested to listen to one of your previous podcasts talking about continuous glucose monitors as well. Really interesting. So that speaks to, diabetes is a massive risk factor for developing dementia. I recently just had a continuous glucose monitor for a couple of weeks. Just took it off last night actually because it was at the end of its time.
yeah.
And that again, it's a relatively inexpensive way of understanding what's going on in your body. I got some good lessons, stuff that of course you would just is a no-brainer, like Shemaine, don't eat the hardcore carbs.
Yeah, but you assume it's not that bad.
That's right. But when you see your blood glucose spiking into that red zone, it's really concerning, right? Because you know what's going on in there, that you've got too much blood glucose, that's damaging to blood vessels. And as I said, that there's an accumulative effect with the tipping point at 75. So I personally found that device to be very, very useful and very interesting, even though I'm I'm pretty good with what I eat. I'm pretty aware of the effects of high blood glucose. Though I'd encourage people to really think about these risk factors, these lifestyle factors, and think about what you can do. And there's a couple of really easy things. Walk for 15 minutes a day as a minimum. Do more if you can. Get a continuous glucose monitor. See how you're doing, and just use that information to lower your blood sugar. Um, if you are short of hearing, go and get your hearing tested. It's pretty easy to do. It's pretty inexpensive. Hearing aids these days are quite minimal. You can't really see them and they work great.
I
Just get in there. Yeah.
have two teenagers too. And they're like, how did you not hear what I just said? And I'm like, they're like, you're going deaf. I'm like, no, no, no. This is a skill I have acquired over the years called selective hearing. I hear what I want to hear and I block out the bullshit.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. There's that too. But with the hearing thing, I think of my younger years in my 20s going to gigs and concerts and standing right up the front because I've always loved music and just blasting my eardrums. I don't recommend that. Wear earplugs if you're going to go to a concert.
So, just back to the continuous blood glucose monitor, it is such a valuable tool. But just like looking at, as a scientist, looking at any data, if you don't have data, you're either guessing or you're kidding yourself. You need
Mm-mm.
to, the thing with the CGM is most of them last 2 weeks. It's not a big deal. Just wear it. Otherwise, you're just kidding yourself, which a lot of people are. And we have a lot of talk around the sugar, the diabetes, and Alzheimer's, of course, being referred to now as type 3 diabetes. And
Yeah.
Alzheimer's is a type of dementia for people who didn't know. Um, it's everything, it's all the things, really. If you want to be healthy later in life, you have to consider everything.
Yeah, and you have to consider it at a time when you actually feel pretty healthy, right? Like in the middle of your life when you're 40, 50, you feel pretty good. But it's just being aware that your brain is sensitive, right? It needs really consistent high blood flow. It uses a huge amount of energy in your body, and it's very susceptible to changes in blood flow. Yeah, and a lot of these lifestyle factors, the problem with them is they damage the blood vessels in the brain, and then
What
you
is
end up
the
with a blood flow problem later.
What is the risk factor then? Like, what are the stats saying in dementia rates between men and women? What is that risk there, I suppose, for us women? Are we at higher risk because of the fun of perimenopause and hormonal changes and all?
Yeah, yes, we are at slightly higher risk than men. Yeah, and I don't think we have a full answer of why, but certainly that big reduction in estrogen and progesterone that happens through menopause. So there's emerging evidence that people who get the patch, uh, hormone replacement therapy have a reduced dementia risk later. So estrogen seems to have a protective effect on the brain. So that's something that's worth considering. Of course, you have to take into account any family history of breast cancer. But if your doctor thinks that you're a low risk for cancer, HRT is something that is definitely worth considering in terms of brain health. Also, yeah, also reduces sarcopenia and also bone loss later. So yeah, there's quite a few benefits to hormone replacement therapy from what I've read.
So as women get older and all these, well, generally first to decline is progesterone and then the estrogen will fluctuate. But one thing we see is that as the progesterone declines, so does the thyroid function. And that then will directly affect circulation, back to what you're saying about the blood flow and circulation. And we start to see then the blood vessels become weaker and break down as well, like that integrity. And that's why
Yes.
women start to see the spider veins, the varicose veins, a bit more edema. You probably don't know this, but for the listeners as well, before we used to call low thyroid function hypothyroid. The original name was mixed edema because edema was kind of the primary symptom that they were looking for on autopsies back in like the 1930s. So we know like edema, circulation, this low blood flow through the vascular system. And a lot of women, um, as they're transitioning through perimenopause, they will notice a lot of cognitive decline. They'll have a lot of inflammation. They'll start getting more headaches and migraines to forget where they put their keys, like putting the milk in the dishwasher and just all the crazy stuff
Oh, yeah.
they do. And um, it's interesting because to me, from the hormonal aspect, I can see the connection where it's influencing like the cognitive decline as you get older. But for you, it must be interesting to look at it in the reverse. Like, this is the outcome that's going to happen because of all of this happening.
Mm, mm.
It's
You
something,
know, I don't mind mentioning this, Shemaine. I'm 50 now, so I've been through most of perimenopause, and I think I'm pretty much into full sort of out the other side now, predominantly.
yeah.
That brain fog thing that happens in perimenopause, oh my gosh, you think you're going insane, right? You think you actually ask yourself, am I getting dementia? Because I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. But I just want to kind of reassure people that is very, very normal. And there is quite a big difference between normal forgetfulness, forgetting where you put your keys, forgetting where you parked your car, right? Huge. Um, and the early symptoms of actual dementia are quite different. So, with the early signs of dementia, often there's a huge change in mood, stepping outside of what you even know to be yourself, right? So we all have mood fluctuations. We have bad days. We get frustrated with our teenagers and our partners and all that. Those kind of moods are just normal, but a mood swing where you don't even recognize your own mood, that would be concerning. And the other aspect is confusion. So we may forget where we put our keys, but when we find them, we go, oh, that's right. I put them on the bed because I was doing something else. You remember that and you know that they're your keys. So with the early stages of dementia, you might look at your keys and think it's your cell phone or some other thing. You might think it's the salt and pepper or something. Real confusion.
So the neurons
So
are not connecting. They're not set. Your eyes are seeing keys, but your brain is seeing something else. It's not connecting.
yeah, that's right. So I just kind of wanted to reassure, just in that perimenopause phase, A, because I've lived it myself, and B, because I've done quite a bit of reading, that kind of forgetfulness and just regular mood swings where you really dislike some members of your household is completely normal.
I know, and
Don't worry.
we laugh about it because it's true. Whatever is true is usually funny, and so many women feel like they're going crazy, but we can stand here and say, "Yeah, it's normal. It is normal. It doesn't mean
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
fun. It doesn't mean it. Yeah, you have to live like this, but it is normal." But that's very helpful because I'm glad that you differentiated between perimenopause, losing your mind, and actually dementia, because a lot of women
Mm,
are concerned, especially those of us. My granny had dementia and she died, and by the time she passed on, I had already immigrated to Canada, so I didn't see the final like year or two, but my family were telling me stories, and I did see her in the early
mm,
stages of dementia before we emigrated. And at that stage she was carrying around a baby doll thinking it was her baby, and she
mm,
remembered me, but years ago, but she didn't know
mm,
who my husband was or my new baby was because she was living
mm.
in a different time to the rest of us. And then it just got worse and worse and worse. And at that stage, she was in a care home. But I know there's a lot of women who take on caring for their parents like this, and it for lack of a better word, I'm going to say it's a death wish. It's very, very hard to take care of someone with dementia. And that's when my granny did pass, everyone was super upset. And I was kind of the only one saying, it's good now. She was trapped in her own head for years
Mm,
and years. She didn't
mm,
know us. Now, depending on your spirituality, now she's back with my granddad and her brothers, sisters. But
mm.
like, it was more torturous to keep her in this cage. Her body was a cage. She was trapped, and I don't want to be trapped ever. Um,
That's the
Especially
thing.
on
When you
that
see it
sense.
firsthand, you know that you don't want to be that person, right?
I have
That's the thing.
I have another friend now, and she's on the tail end of
Mm,
perimenopause, like so close to menopause, and her mom has really bad dementia. And when she goes to visit, she's doing everything for her. She has to get into the
mm,
shower with her and shower with her mom
mm,
because her mom can't wash herself. She can't dress herself. Like, I don't think people understand how extreme it is. It is literally like having a baby again. They can't even feed themselves, they can do nothing at all.
mm,
And for you to then try and finish raising your teenagers, or you're supposed to be like in the prime of your marriage at this stage when the kids
mm,
have effed off, you can go have some fun, but you can't because now you're stressed taking care of your mom, and now your marriage and your family life is suffering, but then your health starts suffering because of all this stress. And
mm,
it's not just a case of mom is losing her mind or has Alzheimer's or dementia. It's like you mentioned earlier, it's this huge outward explosion that affects everyone within
mm,
range. It's just
mm,
insane. And why we're talking, because we were trying to drive home the idea like you need to become brain fit, brain healthy
mm,
now. It is part of, because primarily my audience right now is in the kind of 35 perimenopause and up age group. Now is the time. Yeah, it's great to exercise and sleep well, but you can't forget your brain. So, so important.
mm, mm.
Sorry, I went on a rant there.
No, that's wonderful. And from someone who's, basically through menopause, I just want to give a little ray of hope and a ray of sunshine. It all gets better. It all comes out. You come out the other side and you're like, whoa, that was pretty full on.
That was
I
fun.
think as women, we become expert at reinventing ourselves, right? We have these we have these pretty wonderful, glittery, exciting lives, and then if you choose to get pregnant, you have a baby, and that's like stepping into an alien world
Mhm.
because you're responsible for another human.
Yeah.
And so, that's a massive life-changing event. You reinvent yourself. And as your teenagers grow up, you kind of reinvent yourself again as you kind of rediscover, you go back to the new version of you, right? And I think going through perimenopause and then menopause and then sort of out the other side, it's like, oh, here's this new version of me, another new version. We're going so off topic now,
Yeah.
but it
No.
is fabulous. It's like you get through it and you get to this stage in life where you're like, you truly do not give much of a stuff what people think. You're just like, this is the best me.
Because I've been through
I'm
it all
awesome.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's great. It's great out here at 50.
So much to look forward to. I still need to go through the train of hell and then come out the
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. You'll come out the other side and you'll be an even better version of yourself. It's awesome.
So, we mentioned a few of the kind of lifestyle factors that we can do. And of course, we did touch on sleep before we get into kind of the supplement and molecule aspect of things. How important then is sleep? Because sleep is something that drives me nuts with my clients. I personally am in bed by 8:30 every night. Like, I have to be able to perform. And when I don't sleep, again, I feel the neuroinflammation everywhere. So let's come on, let's go.
Oh gosh. I mean, sleep is just one of those foundational aspects to your life, isn't it? That you absolutely have to have good sleep to perform at your best, to feel joy, to go through life with your eyes wide open. And if you're not sleeping well, gosh, what are you going to do about it? Just switch off earlier. Have a little routine at the end of the night. Personally, I have a bit of a skincare routine that kind of sets my mind into my going to sleep phase of the day. And I find that really useful because it switches off. I often do a short yoga routine before I go to bed as well. And again, it's just like it's making that division between the busy part of your day and the resting part of your day. So that for me, I find that very important. Yeah, I was interested in the Lancet Commission didn't specifically address sleep, but I think that's probably I mean, there are links between poor sleep and the risk of dementia. It just there probably isn't enough evidence just yet to be included in this big global Lancet Commission study. But it's like watch this space. It'll be in the next update. I almost guarantee it in 3 years from now.
But we know sleep is where we reduce a lot of the inflammation, and the lymphatic system, which is the lymphatic system of the brain, cleans out any plaque buildup or inflammatory proteins or toxins throughout the day. And again, if I don't sleep well, I feel it. I'm like, I didn't get my brain cleanup last night.
Mm,
I can feel
mm.
it here. And then if you are looking, and you can speak on this, I'm sure, to like not only consolidate memories and go kind of through that emotional therapy that we get in REM sleep, but to learn new stuff if you are hoping to encourage new brain cell growth and neuron connections. Sleep is a key factor there. Sleep is where the magic happens.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We consolidate our daily sort of activities. We clear out the stuff we don't need, all the small detail, and we reinforce the stuff that's important. And if you don't have a chance to do that, your brain becomes very disordered.
Mhm.
Your thinking becomes very disordered. Hmm.
And that then will contribute to that brain fog that we're getting in perimenopause as well. So back to the supplements, then there's a lot of supplements that get a lot of highlight around like, well, everyone wants to take the magic pill. And before we go into this, everyone, I say to everyone I speak to, we can recommend supplements, we can recommend bioidentical hormone therapy, but if you don't have the basics down, like if you're not sleeping, if you're not going for your walks daily or eating well, supplements are going to get you so far, but you still need the foundational stuff. So we hear a lot about EPA, DHA. Then we've got like ginkgo, great for the brain. Dr. Daniel Amen speaks about that a lot. Collagen has gotten a lot of look in over the last decade, and I actually think a lot of that research was pushed out originally out of New Zealand and Australia. That's where they were doing a lot of the research around collagen and amino acids, and then it kind of just snowballed from there. Then we had that big publication, I think it was in Nature in 2023, and they specifically were looking at the amino acids, but specifically glycine in itself and its anti-aging benefits, anti-cancer benefits, and they had compiled a lot of different studies. There was some on house flies, there was some on worms. So it was a really great citation. And then they had the very potent anti-inflammatory effects of glycine as well. So there was that. Then there's another amino acid. These would be the two amino acids that kind of get the limelight when we're talking about collagen. The other one would be proline. So proline, great for connective tissue, bone formation, muscle, skeletal muscle, heart health, blah, blah, blah. So those two amino acids were already kind of like where the main focus was in collagen. But there's another molecule which you're going to speak about. And I wanted to kind of go over those two to kind of give people a little bit of insight. There's another molecule, which is where your focus is now, called cyclic glycine proline. So tell us what that is.
Yeah, well, cyclic glycine proline is those two amino acids, glycine and proline, when they're put through a prolonged heating process, they cyclize, so they become a dipeptide, two amino acids joined together, basically. And what's interesting about cyclic glycine proline, or CGP for short, is it's very neuroactive. It crosses the blood-brain barrier if you take it orally, and it's intimately involved in the repair of blood vessels, essentially. The tiny ones called capillaries. It actually spurs on the repair and growth of capillaries, but it also reduces vascular dysfunction in the larger arteries in the brain as well. There's about 30 years of research on CGP showing how it works. The mechanism of action is really interesting. So it works by regulating a hormone called IGF-1. And in doing so, it's actually the IGF-1 that binds to the endothelial layer or the inside of blood vessels and regulates. It's like a master builder
Mm.
of blood vessels. So if you build a house, you're not going to do it in a chaotic way. And what can happen with vascular dysfunction is blood vessels can become very chaotic. They get built too quickly, and the lining of the blood vessels is not formed properly, and they become leaky and they grow all over the place. There's too much of them, essentially. So IGF-1 is like a master builder. It makes sure that the construction of the lining of the blood vessels is correct and tight, so that they are not leaky. And so, yeah, so CGP is interesting because it has this quite sort of broad, I guess, broad application or broad mechanism of action whereby it spurs on the growth and repair of blood vessels. And that obviously has quite big implications for all sorts of diseases and general healthy aging.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I work for a company that's commercializing a CGP supplement. I've been with them for about a year and a half now. And the reason I joined them is really because when they said to me, "Oh, we know we've got evidence that it crosses the blood brain barrier when you take it orally," I was like, "Oh, I'm so in. That's so interesting, and that has such a broad application." But I
Yeah.
just wanted to just go touch back on something you said earlier, Shemaine, around, you've got to get the basics right, and supplements can't, there is no magic pill. I am such a believer in that. And I think if there was a soundbite that could be associated with me, it's get the basics right. It's not a very sexy soundbite, right? So supplements are really, they're a top up. They're if you want extra support or you're concerned about something, but they're not going to fix everything, right? You've still got to work on your sleep, your diet, your exercise, all of that. So yeah. So CGP, we've been in market now with our CGP Max supplement range for about 2.5 years, and that's going really, really well. We've got a bestseller which is called CGP Max Brain Health. So that combines our proprietary CGP ingredient together with a nootropic called Bacopa extract. So it combines, I guess, the best of both worlds with this long-term brain protection molecule, CGP, together with Bacopa extract, which is a rapidly acting nootropic that helps your brain fire a bit faster, essentially within an hour or two of taking it. So it's that sort of double whammy effect.
Mhm. So CGP, is it selective in a sense that when we consider brain health, we want as much blood flow as possible? But when we're thinking about, say, a tumor, a cancer tumor, we want to control blood flow. Angiogenesis is a big consideration when, for lack of a better word, trying to kill a tumor. You're trying to cut off the blood flow there so it can't grow. So is it selective the way molecular hydrogen would be selective?
It is selective. So CGP is it's actually it's a really interesting mechanism. So CGP works by competing with IGF-1 to bind to the same binding protein. So when IGF-1 is bound to this binding protein, IGF-BP3 it's called, it's inactive. It's just hanging out in your circulation, not doing anything. So CGP competes to bind to that same protein, and in doing so, it dislodges IGF-1, where IGF-1 can then go and be biologically active, right? But it's only active in circulation for around 1 to 2 minutes, and then it's enzymatically broken down. What we know from our in vitro studies is that CGP increases IGF-1 activity, not overall levels, but activity
Mhm.
when IGF-1 activity is low. It comes down to the molar ratios of them in your circulation. When IGF-1 activity is high, CGP actually lowers its activity. And we know this from our in vitro studies where you can really easily manipulate the level of IGF-1 and CGP that you put in a cell culture dish, right? And you can measure the density of endothelial cells in that dish. So that's how we got that information. So when we think of CGP, it's actually a master regulator of IGF-1 activity rather than a molecule that necessarily boosts IGF-1 activity. So we know that there's a lot of particularly neurodegenerative diseases where IGF-1 activity is pathologically low. So Parkinson's disease, dementia, onset of stroke, multiple sclerosis are examples. And we now have got emerging evidence that a similar situation exists in the metabolic conditions as well. We're just about to publish a clinical trial on that. Um, but in these situations of, I guess you'd call them, they are disease states, we know that IGF-1 activity is pathologically low, and that is has a very big impact on blood flow and blood vessel formation. And so where we really see the biggest benefits of CGP is in these situations where the IGF-1 system is heavily dysregulated. In the case of some tumors where IGF-1 activity is too high, so prostate cancer is one example. I mean, when we haven't done any specific studies on that, that cancer is not, it's not a space for dietary supplements in my view. But there is a lot of in vitro studies that have used CGP in cell lines where IGF-1 is heavily overexpressed, cancer cell lines where IGF-1 is heavily overexpressed. And what you see is that CGP has an inhibitory effect on the growth of those cells. So again, it comes back to that kind of mechanism of action where CGP is regulating the activity of IGF-1 rather than just boosting it.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a really interesting study that was done by our chief science officer, um, part of this sort of regulatory study that she did. She took mice and she inoculated them with a cell line that is overexpresses IGF-1 and is fast growing. And what you see in those mice is that they develop a whole lot of tumors and eventually succumb to the disease. If you give CGP right at the start of that inoculation period, there is a significant reduction in the number of tumors and the size of the tumors that do develop. So again, pointing to CGP actually regulating, and in this instance, down regulating IGF-1 activity. Then they did another experiment where they did that same cancer cell inoculation and they delayed the treatment with CGP. So it was like giving the cancer a chance to become established before then giving CGP. And what they found in that study was that CGP also reduced the number of tumors and the size of tumors, but not to the same extent as if it was right at the start.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a really, yeah, it seems, from everything we know, we see CGP as the master regulator of the IGF-1 activity. And we've just completed a clinical study which is about to be published soon on people with type 2 diabetes who also had peripheral neuropathy. So this is a vascular problem, dysfunction. And after 3 months of taking CGP, they had a significant improvement in their peripheral neuropathy scores.
Wow.
So we're really beyond excited about this because there's
I
really
can tell.
nothing, there's nothing available for people who have peripheral neuropathy. There's only pain treatment, but there's nothing on the market that can actually support blood flow restoration.
From everything you've said there, it sounds to me like CGP is helping with metabolic dysfunction on every level, from the obesity, the diabetes, right through to the Parkinson's. I would guess it has a positive influence with thyroid, which maybe you guys will look into in the future. Maybe
Mm.
pairing CGP with some thyroid or hormone might just change the world forever. But it really sounds like even the MS aspect, everything you said tells me that CGP is, I don't want to say fix, but I can't think of a better word.
Oh,
So fixing metabolic dysfunction. That's what it screams to me. So where
it's oh, yeah. So the other thing we found in that study was that taking CGP significantly reduced HbA1c as well in these people who had diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And I guess our chief science officer is absolutely convinced that the mechanism of action is by reducing insulin insensitivity. We don't actually have data to prove that yet, but that's the next realm for us. We want to look at that because if you can reduce it, if you can improve insulin sensitivity, even a small amount, that's huge, right? Because it's not actually the high blood sugar that's the problem. Well, it is a problem, but it's the lack of sensitivity to insulin that's the underlying cause. So that's a new area of interest for us.
Well, even like the cancer, the MS, the Parkinson's, everything that you've mentioned, like there's a lot of evidence showing us that cancer is directly influenced by metabolic dysfunction. And if
Mm,
you're testing cell lines and seeing that it's stopping growth, to me, that says it would, in the grander scheme of things, help a whole body with metabolic dysfunction. It's
mm,
very,
mm.
it is exciting. It is
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah, it is exciting.
So, is there, I know you guys, you're a leading researcher, originally discovered CGP in black currants 30 years ago, I think. Are there other foods? I know it wouldn't be as in high concentration, but are there other food sources of CGP?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that the research identifying CGP in blackcurrants, I think, was around 2018, and that was what led to the formation of the company, the CGP Lab in 2020. Since the company was formed in 2020, we have literally tested hundreds of food sources for CGP. We Most food sources are quite low in CGP, and in fact, black currants are relatively low in CGP too. So it's really the manufacturing process, and we combine New Zealand black currants with a specific type of collagen. We put that through a heating and pressure process over a period of time, and it's really these bringing these two ingredients together with the heat and the pressure that standardizes and stabilizes the CGP.
So what is the molecule that's being derived from the black currant then?
It does have some CGP in it, but not, and like if you just ate a cup of black currants a day, you wouldn't get enough. So it's really the contribution of of the glycine and the proline amino acids from the collagen together with the black
So you're
currant that
adding
creates
more to it. You're adding more glycine and collagen. Okay.
glycine and proline. Yeah, but the yeah, so that the level of cyclized glycine and proline and regular collagen is also quite low. So it's that heating and pressure process that we put them through that boosts up the amount of CGP to a good level.
Do you know if there's any CGP in dark chocolate?
That's one that we haven't tested, but we should.
You need to test that. Like I'm convinced
Yeah.
there's nothing that dark chocolate cannot do. So you need to test that.
Yes. It is so good, isn't it?
On so many levels. Even for
Mm.
metabolic dysfunction, I'd probably be surprised if you didn't find some in it.
That's a great suggestion. Yeah, that's a food source we
Because
haven't tested.
like they both grow on trees, and so and they're both rich in polyphenols. There would have to
Mm.
be some in it
Yeah,
somewhere.
possibly. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
we've actually found that the CGP level in food seems to be fairly independent of the polyphenol content, not related.
Oh.
Yeah, seems to be more related to the sort of the protein makeup and the protein content.
Well, there is protein in dark chocolate as well. Not a lot, but
Mm,
it's still there. If you
some
guys discover something, I would like a mention in that study, please, giving you
royalties coming your
sponsorship.
way.
Yeah. So this has been really fascinating. I think a lot of people are going to find this interesting. I suppose I'll let you summarize it. If you were to summarize it for the women listening and even the men listening, what advice would you give them if they're starting to get concerned now after listening to us that there might be a higher risk than they originally thought for them and dementia in the future? What would advice would you give them now?
I would say look at your lifestyle. If you're concerned about dementia, like if you see someone in your family who has dementia, if you think that your memory is not doing great, firstly, look at your lifestyle. So there's a bunch of stuff you can do that is addressable and doesn't require you to go out and spend money on any particular supplement. Look at your weight, look at your physical activity. Are you smoking? Do you have a blood sugar issue? Get the basics right. That's my summary. Yeah. And
Stop
then if you
watching
want,
TV before bed.
stop watching TV before bed. Do yoga instead. Do some stretches. Just pop down on the ground and do 5 minutes of stretching instead of
Read
watching
a
TV.
book. Yeah, like we've lost
Yeah.
the talent of reading, which I would guess you would agree, reading an actual physical book is very good for brain health.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are losing that skill. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
wonder.
Look, the English language in particular, I only speak one language and it's English. It's really complicated, right? It's great. We just need to keep using it and reading it and speaking as much as we can. Just use it or lose it
Oh yeah.
with the
There's
brain.
times where
Yeah.
I read books and then all of a sudden I'm using words that I'd never used before, or I'm like,
Mm.
what is that word? And I end up looking up the word and then I
Oh, great.
integrate it, and there's so much to be said for reading that maybe that's another conversation. I think reading is so undervalued nowadays. If you're looking for anything to reduce anxiety, get into a good book that just takes you out of reality and that will fix you pretty fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was one more thing that I didn't ask you that I wanted to. For people that are maybe interested in trying CPG or CGP, how long does it take to start noticing a difference? Is there a time frame where you could say you should notice improvements in the first 2 weeks or after the first bottle or
Yeah, we typically see improvements at about 3 months. It is going to depend on what's happening with someone's own IGF system and whether that is severely dysregulated. Um, yeah, so our clinical study in people with type 2 diabetes, it was 3 months until we saw a measurable effect, a decrease in their peripheral neuropathy. Our customer feedback for people who don't have diabetes or don't have, a severe conditional disease, they tend to tell us that they feel pretty amazing after 3 months. So, like a breath of fresh air, like a walk in the forest, is what people say to us because it's blood flow, it's oxygen, right?
yeah. I would
Yeah.
wonder if you, even with the diabetes study, if they were also doing other modalities or protocols to improve their health as well, would they have seen improvements faster?
I would think so. In that study, we just encouraged people to stay on whatever medications they were on and to maintain a steady lifestyle. So we didn't want a big placebo effect in there of, suddenly they're, out climbing mountains and things and they weren't doing that before. So, look, anything you can do to improve your lifestyle is going to have a big impact and a supplement can assist further, but it can't do the heavy lifting for you. You've got to do the hard yards yourself.
Yeah, yeah. So if people want to find out more about the CGP lab, it's a real tongue twister.
It is a bit, isn't it?
Where can we direct them?
Oh, well, we've got a website where we sell our supplements, which is www.cgpmax.com. So
And you
pretty
also
easy
have
to.
a lot of studies and literature up there for people to check out.
Yeah, we've got a dedicated website to the science, which is cgp-health.com, and that's where you can read about all of the studies on CGP, and you can check out the amazing career of Dr. Jian Guan, who's our chief science officer. That's for the people who love the science.
Yeah, like me. So if you send me over the link to that Lancet study as well, I will pop it in the description along with the links to the website too,
Will do.
because I know people will be interested to see that.
Yeah,
Okay.
wonderful.
All right, Amanda, this was great. I'm had a great conversation with you. I learned lots, so thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure, Shemaine.
We'll chat soon. If you do look into dark chocolate or thyroid, then come back on and tell us what you learned.
Yeah, will do. I love it.
Okay.
Ideas. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Amanda.
Okay, bye-bye.